listening to the Questionnaire.
Say that again.
You're listening to the Questionnaires.
I've just started.
Right here, for your ears, for your eyes.
The Questionnaire.
Get your comic on.
Poke it up, poke it up, poke it up, poke it up.
Fire. Yeah. After all they'd endured, yeah, we continued to quest. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we did. I am the Unknown Factor, aka that Wade Wilson of hip hop. This is the Questionnaire. Man, it's season 2. It's been phenomenal. I just had Howard Wong on with all kinds of stories. Just had Marcus Roberts talking that epic, huge crossover they're doing with Epiphany Engine. Just had Ron Mars on talking all kinds of things about the Marvel DC omnibus that they're getting ready to drop. It's so much, man. And most of them had co-hosts. Marcus didn't. But, we try to keep a co-host over here. We try and keep it, because I think, honestly, it just helps with my credibility and, make the show look a little more professional, let's be honest. So for that, today it's Stephen Grant.
Hi.
You did see? You do. You don't. He's like it's like the calm and then me. I just can't do calm. I don't know how to do it, man. I prefer to get savage and a little bit spacey. You know what I mean? But I do never ever go ghost, Stephen, because I feel like that would be rude. But the gentleman we're having on today does a little space ghost, gets a little savage with Avengers, as well as a number of other things. David Pepose in the house.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Pepose. Wait, no, Pepose. I said it right the first time, didn't I?
Yep, David Pepose. Nice to meet you.
Last names, man. They're the scourge of my sanity with this show. That's about the only thing, to be real honest.
I get it. Last names, can't live with them. Can't really hold down a job without them.
I mean, no, not again. Well, whatever.
Can you imagine if I just lived my life as like Dave, like just eponymous, like Cher? It'd be a bold ask. So
but
yeah, you could rock it. I couldn't. But yeah, imagine that. That's gonna be my hypothetical for the rest of the day.
I mean, throughout the people, throughout really, we'll say American history, what you've got, people that are known specifically by one name. I mean, the people that come to mind, obviously, Cher, Elvis,
Prince.
Yeah, Prince. Another one historically that's just terrible, and for very bad reasons does his name come to mind. Which, he did what he did. And yeah, so only 3 times can I think of where it's been achieved to where you could do that entertainment-wise. David, what are you planning to do with Space Ghost that you think you could pull that off? I'm gonna be real honest, because I'm loving.
Oh man, I listen. You're setting the bar very, very high for me. I don't know if I can in my year tenure on Space Ghost. I don't know if I'm ever going to write anything that allows me to just shirk off my entire last name. But I am. We're working very hard to deliver an awesome story, regardless. But yeah, we're having a lot of fun with Space Ghost. I'm really trying to kind of bring this character who many people aren't aware of, or they only know him from Space Ghost Coast to Coast. We're really trying to kind of bring him back to his superhero roots, but trying to tell that story through the lens of 2024 storytelling sensibilities, and really kind of just trying to inject kind of a brand new, fresh take on a classic, iconic character.
I've obviously got issue 2 and issue 1's behind it, and I haven't had the chance to read issue 2 yet. I meant to do that before this show, but I was trying to make sure another quest got out, but that's neither here nor there. So,
sure.
I
get it.
It's like how many times do you need to write, Howard, but you want to read that comic, but you don't want to read that comic because you had to write?
Yes, that is the eternal question. Is you of course have to hit your deadlines, but there's so many great things coming out every week, and I try to make it a point every Wednesday to really hunker down and spend a couple of hours just keeping up to date with what's cool and what's out this week. But yeah, there's never enough time, never enough money in the wallet. But yeah, I try my best.
But I will say, man, with what you're doing with Space Ghost, the thing that really intrigued me is how you quickly made it to where you could see the team was building that he had. Like you introduced him at that point. I really, really like that. And I'm very curious. I think the main thing is I can't it's been so long since I've seen some old Space Ghost. But I know Blip. Blip was pretty handy,
Yeah,
you know? And
yeah.
yeah,
You
I
know,
just want to know how much of this how intricate of a part of the team do you intend to make him? Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think Blip is kind of the linchpin of our whole narrative, and I don't want to give too much away, but as our story progresses, you'll see kind of why Blip is such an important part of the book. But yeah, I mean, when Dynamite approached me asking if I was interested in Space Ghost, and I had awareness of the character. I grew up during the Coast to Coast years, and also my first industry experience. I was an intern at DC during like Batman RIP and Final Crisis, and that was when I started kind of learning about the legends of the industry, and Alex Toth being one of them. Is sort of I heard somebody refer to him once as the Jack Kirby of Hanna-Barbera, and I feel like that's a very accurate way to describe him. But that's when I learned that, oh, Space Ghost, came out right on the heels of Adam West's Batman. That was part of sort of everybody trying to capitalize on that trend, either by licensing their own superhero TV shows or inventing characters of their own. And Space Ghost kind of being Adam West's Batman in space. For me, the thing that really stood out when I was reviewing all those old episodes was it wasn't like, say, a Batman comic where you've got episodes with Batman and you've got episodes with Batman and Robin, and it still feels organic one way or the other. Jan and Jason Blip were integral parts of every single episode, and I think it was I don't know if it was deliberate or if they were just sort of accidentally forward thinking, but it made a lot of sense if you're trying to market a television show.
Deliberate.
Yeah, like if you're trying to market a television show to young kids, having Jace as something that young boys can watch, and then having Jan as something that young girls can glom onto. And then, back in the day, if you added monkeys to a cover at DC, you'd see a noticeable bump in sales. And so having that animal sidekick be a monkey, I mean, it all seems to fit. And I think between reading Joe Kelly and Ariel Olivetti's run on Space Ghost, which is very much a standalone superhero origin about Space Ghost in particular, Jan and Jace didn't hugely factor into that run. I think between that and just watching all the old episodes, I was like trying to write Space Ghost without Jan and Jason Blip. It was like trying to make like a banana split without the banana. Like it feels that's what makes Space Ghost unique to me, is that he has those that core group of sidekicks. And and I just kind of started building the story around that. So but yeah, Blip fans, keep your eyes peeled. We've got a lot of fun stuff planned. In fact, I am actually in the process of writing the Blip-centric issue of our run as we speak. And I think if we stick the landing on it, it'll be my favorite series of the whole run.
Were you tempted to watch any Space Ghost Coast to Coast?
I did revisit some of those episodes. But yeah, very quickly I realized you can watch all of the original 60s run of Space Ghost in a couple of days. If you're taking detailed notes, maybe a couple of weeks. I watched that. I watched Space Stars. Coast to Coast, that's I think 11 seasons, 14 seasons, something around that. Yeah, I'd still be watching it if I watched every episode. But yeah, I definitely revisited a lot of those, and they really did feel like a time capsule. It felt very much of its time, and I guess in a lot of ways that's the lesson I picked up from Space Ghost, and why I felt empowered to kind of do this like ultimate style take on him, is that every era that Space Ghost has come out, it's always been a product of its time. You've got that 60s run. That's very evocative of Adam West. And you have the revival in the 80s, which is kind of coming shoulder to shoulder with Super Friends and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And then Coast to Coast feels so emblematic of like the MTV generation. And so, and even Joe Kelly's run, I know it came out just before Batman Begins, but you wouldn't know it having read it. And so, yeah, I felt like that kind of gave me permission, I think, to try to reinvent the character a little bit while still trying to remain true to, I think, the core elements that's made Space Ghost so iconic over the years.
That's did man, but no Brack show. I gotta disrespect Brack like that. Just
Brack's great. Oh, well, you know what? Andy Merrill, I give him all the credit in the world. First off, he's been such a sweetheart about this series. You know, he's been a real champion and a real supporter of it. But I don't think Space Ghost, I don't think I'd be writing this book without the work that he did on Coast to Coast and the Brack show. I see it a lot as Andy and his team really kind of kept the name of Space Ghost alive. And it was really kind of like, to mangle some metaphors, it's kind of like an archaeologist a little bit, you know? I think Coast to Coast really kind of preserved the bones of Space Ghost in amber for as long as it did. And so now I'm in this kind of cool position where I get to kind of excavate those bones, and I get to show the world that they're just as strong as they were in 1966. So it's a cool position to be in. And I think everything about this book has really been a real gift. And so it's been a treat to write.
that's an intriguing way to look at that. But and I mean, I think you're right, man. As far as if it wasn't for those shows, yeah, you probably would be writing something else right now, David.
Yeah, I mean, but honestly, I couldn't ask for a better book. This really is kind of all the fun stuff that I love about the superhero genre, and all the freedom to get to pursue it. You know, it's sort of, I don't have to, you know, and Stephen can attest to this, is that when you're working in a superhero universe, there is a little bit of sort of there's a game of traffic. So
Well, you're right. Ultimately, when you're doing superhero comics,
yeah,
you better want to write what they want you to write. Is
yeah,
what it, if you're fine with doing that, you're going to be fine. If you're not fine with doing that, you're going to kind of be in trouble after a while.
yeah. Well, and also just figuring out, you know, what toys you're allowed to play with.
Yeah.
You know, I know that's one of the trickier parts of the dance for me, is you got a story idea in mind and you're like, listen, I would love to use this villain, or I would love to use this character in the roster. And, you know, invariably, statistically, someone will say, well, listen, MODOK's being used in X-Men. MODOK was one I frequently asked for. Or the character of Akihiro, Wolverine's son, he's being used over in Marauders. And so you kind of have to retool your plans a little bit and think like, okay, how do I still get the point across, either with a different pre-existing character, or do I invent one of my own? And Space Ghost, it's you don't have to do that. Space Ghost really has this deep bench of iconic villains, and of course the core cast is so amazing. And there's no negotiation that you have to go through. If anything, it's really just what stands out about each of these characters to me, and what kind of unique twist or spin can we put on it to play up those qualities. And as long as the licensor is okay with that take, you're off to the races. And so it's been a real.
Got much feedback from Hanna-Barbera on this stuff?
Oh, they've honestly, they have been the best licensor I've ever worked with. They're just very enthusiastic about what we're doing. Very few notes. I think I can count on one hand the number of notes I've gotten on this series to date, and I'm in the middle of writing issue 7 right now. Yeah, you know, the notes I see in the margins. Yeah, that rules. Yeah, run with that. I'm like, okay. It's a very unique and privileged position to be in, for a license, especially that's been around this long. But I give Warner Brothers a lot of credit. They've been very gung-ho from the moment I said, hey, I kind of want to do this take. They're like, yeah, run with that, kind of reclaim those roots a little bit. And yeah, they've been really wonderful in kind of letting me kind of run with the big swings that we've been trying to take.
I'm curious then, man. Because I would say that, you know, you're still writing Punisher, right?
I'm wrapped on Punisher for now, but the door's open. You know, if there's the door's open for more, for sure.
And I can only imagine, Jake, because I know there was controversy behind that with it not being Frank Castle and a number of other things. And then you've got the Savage Avengers, where you were able to play with Conan within the Avengers for a short time, and the group that
Sure.
you had there, and then you've got Space Ghost that you're doing. I'm curious, out of those 3 books, what one got you the most notes?
You know, well, that's an interesting question because when I was working on Savage Avengers, the notes I got were more from Conan properties. It was kind of at the beginning of the run. And that was honestly, I would say that was all ornamental. You know, it was them saying, hey, like Thulsa Doom, you know, his people are going to be here in the nation of Stygia. So like use that. And, things like, you know, I had an army that was being used in the beginning of issue 2, and they were like, well, use this army instead, which was great because like I feel like I know the Marvel universe backwards and forwards, but you know, the Conan universe, I kind of knew just bits and pieces from just pop culture that I picked up. Whereas Punisher, we went back and forth quite a bit, sort of in the development stage, because there were a lot of things that we wanted to accomplish with that book. There were things like, how do we introduce a new Punisher that isn't going to be like hopelessly convoluted? Because when you think of Frank Castle, that's a pretty straightforward concept. That's a pretty, you know, you can say very quickly, Frank Castle's family was killed in a shootout with mobsters, and he vowed to, you know, have war on crime for the rest of his life. So we needed something that was kind of, you could boil it down pretty quickly. And so we, you know, we wound up kind of settling on the John Wick of S.H.I.E.L.D., you know, as a sort of a way to kind of sell that. And on top of that, you know, like I read newspapers, like I know that there's like real world controversy associated with the Punisher as a character, as a concept, as iconography. And so with this kind of new character that we were introducing, how do we tell a story that still feels like a Punisher story, but how can we kind of sidestep all those mines, all those landmines? And so figuring out things like, you know, there are a lot of real world military and police, law enforcement personnel who are like, the Punisher, that's my guy. Which, you know, that can set people's teeth on edge. You know, that's the symbol of extrajudicial vigilantism. So, you know, how do we have a guy who has the skills to be a Punisher, but isn't drawing from like a real world military organization? How do we, you know, something we talked about early on was we'd like to give him some heightened weaponry. And that works for a number of reasons, you know, both from a storytelling perspective, it kind of gives Joe a little bit of his own niche that he can pursue. But also, you know, you don't want somebody to walk into a Walmart in the real world and think they can walk out as the Punisher. And so how can we kind of put that on a little bit of a higher shelf? Things like just how does he operate differently from Frank? And so I really wanted to lean into the gun fu of it all. And that's something that Dave Wachter, the co-creator of Joe Garrison and our artist in the book, I think did really magnificently. But yeah, it took, there was a lot, and I should add, telling this story in 4 issues, which is its own kind of challenge. You know, that was during a period where, you know, Marvel was doing a lot of 4-issue miniseries. And so being able to kind of tell this self-contained story in that period, with that kind of runway, yeah, it was certainly, I think, the biggest challenge of a book that I've had in my career, but I feel so good about how it turned out. And I think it was just me and Dave Wachter were really kind of like focusing as hard as we could on just how do we, just from a nuts and bolts perspective, how do we make this thing as like, just feel like a Punisher comic? And so I'm really happy with how it turned out. I'm really excited to see that Joe's got more adventures coming. He's going to be appearing in Erica Schultz's new Daredevil, The Woman Without Fear series coming out. I think that comes out next month. So, and yeah, that's the thing I'm most excited about, is seeing other creators buy in and seeing the way that they play with Joe as a character, because ultimately that's how he's going to gain traction. And that's ultimately how he's going to, you know, survive as a character, is the more creators that play with him and the more that use him over the years to come. Yeah, I'm very excited to see where the character winds up.
I'm just curious on a different. You saying you wanted MODOK a lot. Were you trying to make him a Savage Avenger?
No, I was trying to make him a Punisher. No, I'm kidding. No, but can you imagine what the skull logo would look like with a MODOK head? That, I'm telling you, $1 million idea. I'm gonna have to call Tom Brevoort about that. No, I wanted to use him as a villain in a lot of different things. I wanted to use him in Avengers Unlimited. I wanted to use him in Fantastic Four. I wound up getting to sort of use MODOK in Savage Avengers. What did I call him? It wasn't Mo Deathlock. No, it was Death Doc. That's what it was. A Deathlock version of MODOK. I think it was like digitally enhanced, artificial, telepathic, something designed only for killing. But yeah, that was probably my crowning achievement at Marvel. So I can probably hang it up from there. The Deathlock MODOK. But yeah, he's a super fun character. He feels like quintessentially Marvel. And I feel like he checks like all my favorite boxes for a villain. That he looks so unique, and he's got like the tech stuff, and he's also got like the connections to AIM, so he's got his own henchmen, and he's got like his psychic blast, so he can do a lot of different cool stuff with that. And yeah, I mean, I think I grew up reading 90s Captain America, where MODOK and MODAM showed up a lot, and so yeah, I've got a soft spot for the character.
Well, so I mean, we're talking about a lot of IPs that you've worked on, right? Sure. That are all great books, but you're also doing a little work with another individual that's been on the show a couple different times, that being Alex Cormack.
Yeah, lovely guy. I can't say enough good things about working with Alex Cormack. We're talking about kind of the next project we're working on together. I'm just doing like a final polish of the outline for that. And then I'm going to hunker down on the first issue. But yeah, Alex is one of the most talented artists I've ever worked with. Working together with him on The Devil That Wears My Face. That was a project that, honestly, I'm still pinching myself that it came out. It's one of the most fun creator-owned projects I've ever done. And I think that's because of Alex. I think he's the best horror artist of his generation. I think he is amazingly talented. He draws like a Terminator. And also he's, I think, the most gracious collaborator I've ever worked with. He and I would go back and forth on every single page. And Alex was just an amazing collaborator. And he really believed in it as collaboration. That like he'd be like, oh, hey, like, what do you think about this? Or hey, I'm thinking about one of these two things. What do you think? And just a lovely guy. So I'm very excited to be working with him again. Because yeah, I mean, he made me a horror fan, honestly. I've been such a fan of Alex's since his work on Sync over at Comics Tribe. So being able to finally team up with him, real career highlight.
Yeah, I know he's, like I said, he's done some great stuff. You have him over here, as well as with Rich Duack, because they've done a lot of stuff over there. Mad Cave, man. I have one. Can I be real honest? Because firstly, if you're interested in hearing more Mad Cave, we just had Mike Martz on a couple episodes ago. You can check that out.
Mike.
Yeah, great, man. Just there's so many stories over here, I swear. I can't even remember all the stories that have been told on this quest. So you know what? Besides the point I was gonna make, let's just jump on to something completely different, because that's how my brain runs. All right? Cons. You do a lot of them, David. Yeah? What's your best con story? All right? The one that just will drop a jaw.
My best con story? I mean, probably is like my favorite convention stories are like the things that just like are fun for me. Like I love doing C2E2, the year my first book came out. That was like my first con as a writing professional. I got my start in comics journalism, so I had a little bit of experience, on the con floor. I'd done C2E2 in San Diego and New York most years leading up to that. I'm trying to think of like a story that like that people would actually appreciate, not just me, because I love meeting up with like creators and getting to know people, getting to meet people who have come up with me, but also like just meeting creators who I grew up reading, and I know for example, we talked about it before the show started, like when I met Steven for the first time last year at San Diego, because I feel like in certain ways he feels like my Looper, creatively speaking, in that, like, you're a Black Knight fan.
But okay.
I mean, you're a Black Knight fan, and like you had worked on Moon Knight, and the fact that like Punisher wouldn't be Punisher without you, and the fact that like you were so gracious.
When we met last year, and you basically wanted to talk to me because you were all apologetic about doing the Punisher, and it's like, I don't want the character, and then you told me what you're doing with it, and I thought, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds a lot better than what most other people propose for it. And then I read the book, and I thought, yeah, this works fine. This works fine. I'm okay with this.
I appreciate. I'm glad we had your blessing. I was not expecting to see you when that happened. I saw you right in front of me, and I was like, oh, I have to talk to this guy, and I hope he doesn't get mad that I'm like changing his baby.
No, I was much more upset. I was much more interested in you using the Black Knight than using the Punisher, because.
Listen, I love writing Black Knight. Man, give me a series with Dane any day. That character was so fun to write. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other stories that are like that people would like. Like, I mean, yeah, it's like the only stories I could think of. There was one year where like a buddy of mine and I were at Baltimore, and I think I think the escalators were out, and so we walked down like one of the escalators, and then like immediately ran into Garth Ennis, who was trying to walk up the escalator, and he looked very annoyed with us. I think other than that, there was the story of how a Deadpool cosplayer made it so that my fiance will never go to a convention again. We were behind my booth at Baltimore a few years ago, and he talked at us for a good 20 minutes, and it was very not safe for work. And I could just we couldn't really get out. He was literally parked in front of our table, like on a motor scooter. And I could just kind of sense her like withering, and I was like, oh, she's never going to go to another convention again. I think this Deadpool cosplayer has officially buried the matter. She reads all my scripts. She does love. She's very supportive of my job, but I do think that she never did another con again, and I think we have that Deadpool cosplayer to thank for that. So I guess that's my con story.
Why can I, man? Because this is why is it that for some reason it's the people that dress up fully as Deadpool at conventions that will do things that
I think you've just answered your own question.
But look, I'm a fan of Deadpool. I've been a fan of Deadpool for a long time. Like I say, I am the Wade Wilson of hip hop. You know what I mean? But it's funny because I see these people that go to conventions, they dress up as Deadpool. And look, if you went to a hip hop show and you did these things, you're gonna get knocked out. That's just how it's gonna go. Okay, it's just what's gonna happen. But it's like at a convention they go and they get away with these things freely. And I don't understand why they feel
people talk a lot about knocking people out, but they don't do it.
And when it's in a bar, yes, that's what I'm saying. It's just so weird. I don't understand though. I think the thing that annoys me more than anything about it is I've been a fan of Deadpool for a really, really long time. I've read most every piece of Deadpool work that probably has ever, like a lot of it. Like if Deadpool's in a comic, there's a high chance that I have read it at some point in my life. I don't understand why people take away the whole aspect that that's all he is a douchebag that runs around and causes chaos. Because sincerely, if you look at him, that's not what he is. He's a guy that does that, but he does it with the grandest and best of intentions. He doesn't go around spewing things like that unless he's trying to make some kind of point to do something, and he wouldn't just normally do it to make someone uncomfortable unless he had a problem with that person on some level. Then he will, but then he's just doing it because that person's probably kind of a prick to begin with.
I'm sure that, you know, I'm sure nobody means anything by anything, but and maybe I have a greater appreciation of it now, having written a Punisher, and maybe Stephen, you might feel the same way, but you know, there are certain characters that like are implicitly don't try this at home characters. And I think sometimes that gets a little lost in our current pop culture landscape, and especially when, you know, you're dressing the part and you've got a mask on, there's a degree of anonymity that goes into it. And I don't think there was any ill intent or anything. If anything, I think the guy was like just trying to, you know, make conversation with a creator, is kind of weird and off-putting as that particular conversation was. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's sort of, I don't hold it against anybody.
The fact that it was Deadpool may have been coincidental in that.
Yeah, you could have said, I mean, I'm sure there could have been the same story with a Joker cosplayer, or, you know, I'm sure there's
conventions with people who are just dressed in street clothes. So it's, you know.
You know, it's part of the fun of conventions. You never really know who's going to show up, and sometimes, you know, sometimes you have really fun conversations with fans who like really kind of remind you why you're doing this, and sometimes you just have kind of funny stories where you're just like, well, that guy's a character. Thankfully, I don't think I've ever had any like truly negative experiences with any con goers. You know, I think every once in a blue moon you'll get somebody who like flips through the book and then says, I don't read. And that's not really negative. That's just kind of, I feel bad for that person who doesn't read anything. You know, I think I got like one Punisher fan who was granted, it was before the book came out, that I think was like very protective of the character, and thought that we might have beef over that. And I was like, no, like it's all fictional. I don't have any beef with anybody over anything. But yeah, no, I think, you know, fans, I think by and large, it's always a pleasure to get to see them at cons and to have them come up either with your work or being interested in your work. That's really the greatest joy of this job for me. You know, it's just being able to connect with people and having them connect over my work. It's such a compliment, and it's a real honor.
No, I got to go along with that in terms of conventions. I mean, most of, you know, I don't really remember that many convention experiences because, you know, they all kind of blend into each other. Yeah. And but, you know, by and large, I enjoy meeting the fans. You know, it's even when you get ones who are critical about stuff, you know, it's fine. You know, it's good that you're reading the stuff. You know, it's like if you want to be, you can be as critical as you want to about it. That's fine.
But
hey, if you bought the book.
But the thing I have to go back to that David just said, if someone would go pick up the book and then go, I don't read. How often have you had that?
Yeah, it's
It happens a lot. There are a lot of people out there who only buy comics for the art for whatever reason. They don't read the book, you know.
Oh, I feel like, especially now.
I mean, they can burn the book for all I care if they're buying it.
As long as you bought it. I think it's also just, especially with the way that cons are going today and the way that pop culture is kind of like atomized, you know, and especially post-COVID. I think there are people, you know, they'll buy the ticket kind of for the experience. You know, they'll want to walk around, or maybe they'll want to meet a celebrity, or maybe they'll want to get like a toy or a collectible or a Funko or a hoodie or a t-shirt or what have you. You know, maybe some people will go there for commission. It's been very eye-opening for me. It's something I try to think about a lot, is that like there are people who are fans of like this general comic book zeitgeist, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're interested in buying a book, you know, especially at a convention. And everybody's got a finite budget. And so I've learned kind of not to take it personal. For me, it's sort of every time that I meet a fan, it's just an opportunity. Or I should say, every time I see somebody looking at my books, I think that's an opportunity to meet a new fan. And so, I do my level best to kind of give them the elevator pitch. If anything, that's gotten trickier as I've done more and more books. Back when I only had one book, it was very easy to say, oh, what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? You'll love Spencer and Locke. Now it is a little bit of a moving target, and now you see people who they'll come to my table and they'll be like, oh, Space Ghost, that looks really cool. And I don't necessarily need to pitch it. Or Moon Knight, they'll be like, oh, I love Moon Knight. I haven't done a show yet with the Punisher trade yet, but San Diego's coming up. So that'll be really fun to see people, see people's response to that, whether it be like, oh, that's Punisher, but that's not Frank. What is that? And I'm very curious to see kind of how the ratio is going to break down of people who say, I only want Frank. This is not my Punisher, which is completely legitimate. Or the people who are going to be like, I have to see what this is. My curiosity won't let me go away with this. But yeah, I mean, honestly, this business can be so isolating. We're doing this all from home. I'm lucky enough to have a future spouse who reads all my work, and I have buddies that I communicate with online about it. But you're working from home, and so getting to actually like be out in the world and see people who are engaging with your work, that's really, I think, like the biggest reward for me.
Well, what if you want to gather together with a group of creators at some point later? David, we do host PanCons as well as Steven's taken part in several of those, as well as we're going to start playing D&D over here every month or so. First time we're playing D&D, I've got Hannibal Taboo who's going to be DMing, who he's created a whole world. Yeah, great.
Hannibal's a sweetheart. I like him a lot.
Oh yeah. So he's our DM, and then obviously I'm playing because it'd be really odd if I wasn't. Like, I'm just gonna stand there as a bystander. David Milburn from my local comic book shop, Shiro Gautier from up in Canada, who's worked on The Great White North, and then Alan Henry, who is Cocaine Bear. He's done work for the Marvel and DC films. He's done a lot of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, Alan's done a lot of stuff. So if you want to come play D&D sometime, you can always come hang out, and we'll hopefully have a different group of creators, because it's gonna be real interesting playing how we're gonna play D&D. I think it's gonna hurt my head. Yeah. But wait. So why was it that email from Tom, man?
Wait, what? I'm sorry?
Why was it that email from Tom? Like, what, you didn't think that was the moment really where you were like, when you got that Savage email or Savage Avengers email?
That day is going to be burned into my mind for the rest of my life. At that moment, I actually was kind of like not sure what my future in comics was going to look like. I had just finished up Scout's Honor. I'd done my Kickstarter for the OZ. But that was kind of, I didn't have any projects lined up at that point. Like, I'd spent the beginning of COVID really kind of burning through projects very, very quickly, where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this anthology. I think I did 2 or 3 anthologies. I did Scout's Honor. I wrote OZ. I finished writing Grand Theft Astro in the middle of that. I was trying to kind of keep myself occupied, especially during those early days of the pandemic. And Scout's Honor had come out, and I was not at all prepared kind of for what the response to that book was going to be. I mean, I think that's probably my best reviewed book of my career. And I certainly did not expect that. I if anything, was very nervous when that first issue came out, that I was just like, oh, is anybody going to get it? Are people going to like this? So, but it had been a few months since that series had wrapped up. I had been in contact with Tom Brevoort over the years. Every time I had a book come out, I would email him and just be like, hey, wanted to let you know I had a new thing come out. Tom had told me a few months prior that he said, listen, I want you to know that I knew your name as a reviewer, and I knew that you weren't always the easiest person to please. And so I just want you to know that for you, good enough is not going to be good enough. And I remember seeing that email, and honestly, I was like, Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. Like I told him like I I didn't want to do this job if I did it half-assed. You know, I want every book that I do to be the best possible version of that book within my skill set. And if he sees anything that I can ever do to improve, like please let me know. Don't hesitate to put my feet to the fire. And I guess that was the right answer because yeah, a few months later, I'd actually had lunch with a buddy saying like, I don't have any projects lined up. Like, I mean, you know, I'm going to keep pushing, but boy, I don't know what my future is going to look like. And the next day I get an email from Tom Brevoort saying possible Marvel project. And something in the air must have changed because I see that email and I guess my eyes went wide. And our puppy, Ruby, who I think she was only about a year and a half at that point, pounced on me. Something clearly changed. And so at that time, he didn't tell me what the project was. I had to fill out some paperwork. When you start working at Marvel, and I imagine this is the case at DC as well, but at this point, they send you legal paperwork saying, hey, this thing, whatever you're about to pitch us, if we have something currently in the works that's similar to that, like it's a coincidence, you can't sue us. So I filled it out and I was thinking, oh man, I wonder what they're gonna, you know, have me do. Is it gonna be a short or maybe something in anthology or like a one shot, or dare I get my hopes up, could it be a mini series? That's when Tom says, so we're gonna be relaunching Savage Avengers and we wanted to see if you had any ideas. And yeah, man, it was like, you know, I feel like I don't know if it's like being drafted into the Yankees or being drafted into NASA. Just that email, like, it's life changing, truly. And I think at the time I was very worried that I was in a bake-off situation, thinking like, oh, am I competing with anybody else on this? And I think only in retrospect, having been in bake-off since then, that was not a bake-off. That was an assignment being offered to me. But yeah, it really that whole book changed my career, and it really kind of like reaffirmed that the leap of faith was warranted, and that, you know, this was going to be my career as long as I put in the work. So yeah, I love that book still. I think Savage Avengers is one of my favorite things I've ever written. I know that there are bits and pieces that as a more experienced creator, I might have done a little bit differently. But I think kind of as a whole, it just feels like the perfect first book at Marvel, and what I wouldn't do to write another book like it. It really it let me scratch every creative itch I could have ever asked for. You know, I've said many a time I'd written that book for 100 issues if the market could sustain it.
That's
Yeah.
actually something I'm going to ask you about, because it's a question that people always ask me in interviews, and I hate the question. I'm so tired of answering it. But I was going to ask you, you know, when I broke in, which was the late 70s, it was very difficult to break into Marvel, and my circumstances were completely unique. I'm not going to go into them, but it was not, but you know, there was a certain process that you generally worked through. But nowadays, I was wondering how you broke into Marvel nowadays, because certainly DC and Marvel, and I think Dark Horse and other companies are all closed shops now. It's not like you can just type up your pitch and send it to them and they'll read it and get back to you, which is basically how it was done. It's not how I did it, but it's how it was done when I broke in. But you know, so I was just wondering how did you, not that there's anything wrong with that, break through that ceiling, you know, crack that ceiling.
So,
And that kind of answered, I mean, you kind of answered it there, that you, you know, because basically nowadays you can't encourage them to hire you as you have to wait for them to ask you.
Yes, so, I mean, it's a weird kind of rhythm that I haven't even perfectly mastered, but it's that you have to put out a certain amount of creator-owned work that gets a certain amount of traction on its own, and then also kind of reach out to these editors to stay on their minds. And that's when, eventually something might, maybe the chips fall your way. I mean, and it's all, I always say, I met my fiance, I did online dating in New York City. And I feel like that was like the best preparation for a comics career, more than like anything else I'd ever done, because you're going to get 1,000 no's, but all it takes is the right yes.
Yeah.
And every single rejection is just, that's your step forward towards the yes. And so, yeah, I mean, but even then it's like, like I've worked with Tom, pretty much consistently for the last 3 years. There are other editors, who have no idea who I am. And it's just a matter of you kind of keep knocking on the doors, until you don't have to introduce yourself anymore. And I look forward to the day that maybe I hit that. It's not today. But yeah, I think ultimately the thing I always think a lot about is, my first book came out was a little bit more than 7 years ago, and the landscape has changed dramatically in those 7 years. And that's the thing I always get concerned about for new talent, is that, the industry does feel like it's consolidated a bit. And also, you find a lot of these publishers that are sort of entry-level publishers, and you hear stories all the time about non-payment, or they shut down, or they go into bankruptcy, and people's IP, or they don't have access to it anymore. I'm actually in that situation. My very first publisher was Action Lab, and there are the stories out there. I mean, I haven't been paid by them for many years. I'm part of that kind of class action tort because I want my IP back, because I want to do a third volume of that book. It's tough. I think people trying to break in right now, I mean, Kickstarter, I think, is a very valid way to break in. But I think ultimately the way you kind of have to hit that critical mass is you still need to go through the direct market if you want to work,
Right. Yeah.
big
True.
2 licensed work. There are plenty of people who have careers exclusively or primarily just in Kickstarter. You see people like Charlie Stickney or Pat Shand or Russell Nahelty, and they are doing very, very well for themselves. So if you want just a career in comics, that is a very valid way to do it, and a very lucrative way to do it. But if you're gunning for, I want to write for Marvel or DC, you need to kind of make your bones in these smaller publishers, and then make your way to the mid-tier and write stuff that gets enough traction that when you email an editor, they can say, oh, I mean, Scout's Honor changed my career because I had been emailing editors Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel and OZ, and they were very polite, when they had the time to respond. Scout's Honor was the first book that Tom Brevoort and CB Cebulski said, oh yeah, I already had that on my pull list. And I think that is how it's a war of attrition. Honestly, you just kind of keep putting out work and keep knocking on the doors until somebody hopefully answers.
And I think it's funny though, the 2 editors you mentioned, man, as far as or the 2 editors that I know, being Tom Brevoort and Mike Martz, they've both been on the show. And I'll tell you the other editor that comes to mind. James. What's James's last name? It escapes me. You probably worked with James. Emmett. Yeah, James. Yeah.
James Emmett.
Yeah, James Emmett. And then I'll tell you though, with what I've seen you do, Dave, there's another editor that was actually the first quest we've ever had that I'd like to see you work with. That being Matt Hawkins, because I see they're relaunching Witchblade right now, and I've always been a fan of Jackie and the Darkness. And sincerely, I think you would have an interesting take on that.
Yeah, Matt and I, we've crossed paths before. We almost had something back in the day, and it kind of fell through pre-COVID. Darkness is cool. I would certainly write it. Top Cow knows where to find me.
Is there? What are you, just character-wise, man? What would you want to write? Like, if you could just pick and choose,
Boy.
Is there an IP that you look at? Because I mean, you've gotten to play with quite a bit, but obviously there's
I've been very
tons
lucky.
and tons. Yeah.
Well, I feel anything Avengers related. I love the Avengers. Being able to the fact that I got to write Savage Avengers and Avengers Unlimited in the same year. I was thinking like I'm gonna get hit by a bus. Like I don't know what else I have left to shoot for. Doctor Strange is another bucket list. What I wouldn't do to write that character. I've had a pitch in my back pocket for 15 years.
What Joe Potter said about Doctor Strange?
Yeah.
He's a character everyone wants to write and nobody wants to buy.
Yep. I know. It's like I love that character, and I think there's so much cool stuff that could be done with him. But yes, yeah, everybody's got a Doctor Strange pitch. I'm sure everyone's knocking on Marvel's door for that character 24/7. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of characters that'd be really cool. I would love to do stuff in the X Office. Wolverine would be super cool. He's one of my favorite characters. Nightcrawler is really cool. I actually, it didn't go anywhere, but like I wrote a pitch for Nightcrawler a little while back, and I think Gail Simone's going to do an incredible job with the character on her X-Men book. War Machine. War Machine's a character that I've got a pitch that's like burning a hole in my pocket, and I keep knocking on random editors' doors, being like, "Are you in charge of War Machine right now? Like, can I pitch you on something?" Yeah, Thor would be kind of cool. I don't know. There's really no such thing as like with rare exception, there's no such thing as like a bad character. I think most characters I could probably try to find an angle on. So yeah, Marvel, DC, feel free to surprise me. I'll be your Huckleberry.
Well, let me modify that question a
Sure.
little, Dave, because you're working on Space Ghost right now, which is a property that is obviously stems from the 60s, I believe, 60s, 70s when it was created,
66.
right?
Yep.
All right. Is there something to that ilk, that you would
Yeah.
like to do? Because I mean, Mad Cave obviously just started doing Dick Tracy, which I've been enjoying. I'm enjoying your run on
Yeah,
Space
Alex
Ghost. So
and
yeah.
Michael Marecki, great guy. It's embarrassing to say it. The IP that I would love to do something with is Captain Planet. I've had a Captain Planet pitch for many years. I would do that. The other one that I keep thinking about a lot lately, with like kind of the resurgence of video game tie-ins, Streets of Rage. I love that game growing up, and there's, I think, a really cool way to modernize that. I don't really know who has the rights to the Sega characters at this point. I know IDW's got Sonic, but I don't know if that's just Sonic. But I think that could be like a fun mini series that could be like the Warriors by way of The Departed. So yeah, I think Captain Planet or Streets of Rage would probably be my IP answer at this point.
Sorry, man, I didn't pick it up on Free Comic Book Day, but I know on Free Comic Book Day there was a comic that was based on an old video game. It wasn't Streets of Rage, was it? Or was it Fists of Fury?
Maybe it's Fist of Fury. Oh yeah, it was Fist of Fury over at
Okay.
the publisher that did do the Street Fighter comics. Why am I blanking? Udon. That was it. It was Udon.
Okay. Yeah, I remember seeing that, and that's from the day and age. Those titles all shared such similar names that.
Yes.
Yeah. It got particularly tricky. It truly did. See, that threw off my brain from what my question was, because then I was trying to remember that. It derailed the other track.
You're just asking what IP I wanted to write.
Oh yeah. So, just my brain is stuck. And then you said no. What did you say before the Streets of Rage?
Captain Planet.
Captain Planet. Thank you. That. My brain could not recall it. Captain Planet, David.
Yeah.
Captain Planet. You have a pitch for Captain Planet, like really, like Captain Planet, right? Like,
oh yeah.
Can you tell us any of this pitch, Would you give any of them?
The only thing I'll say about this pitch is, if you like what I'm doing on Space Ghost, you would love what I'm doing what I would do on Captain Planet. And I will say, if you love what I did on Space Ghost and you loved what I did on Savage Avengers, you would love what I would do on Captain Planet. That's all I'll spill, because if anybody else wants that pitch, a publisher's got to pay me for it. But I will say, I remember, I won't name names, but there was a publisher who happened to walk into a comic shop where I was doing a signing, and I tried pitching them on Captain Planet, and they told me they needed another license, like they needed a hole in the head. So that was the fastest, most emphatic no I've ever gotten in my career. But yeah, I mean, look, if if Dynamite ever wanted to pick that up, if Mad Cave wanted to pick that up, if Boom wanted to pick that up, if IDW wanted to pick that up, Dark Horse, whoever, I'll be there with bells on. I think that's a property that is long overdue for a creative revival. I think it's more timely than ever, and I think it's more accessible than ever. So yeah, put me in the game, Coach. I'll write you a Captain Planet. I'll write you a Captain Planet that'll knock your socks off.
I, at this point, just want this to happen so I can discuss what you like, because I mean, there's that's I mean, but you're doing it with Space Ghost right now, as far as taking a character that people watched it nowadays, it totally, I mean, people ain't gonna find that entertaining. And what you're doing in this, man, I'd love to see it. Like, I mean, they could animate it, and I think like it would be a whole different level, you know?
That'd be great. That'd be great. Warner Brothers, get on it.
I can't. You've got me imagining like kind of a hardcore Captain Planet, and I'm like, this seems really out of place. Like Captain
It wouldn't
Planet.
be too hardcore, but I think you can do kind of a more traditional action adventure take with that character. And I think the Planeteers are honestly, they're tailor made to be revisited. I think they've all got very distinct personalities and personality traits, and watching kind of how their dynamics kind of clash with one another. I think I think that's a very cool dynamic. And I think I don't think there would be, I think any changes that would need to be updated for the character are honestly just purely cosmetic. Just give Captain Planet like a full shirt and some pants, and you've done like 80% of the work. Trim the mullet slightly.
Slightly.
Slightly. No, I've thought about that pitch for a very long time. If a publisher's out there listening, give me the keys to Captain Planet. I'll cook you up something real cool.
It's Skybound, man. It sounds like it's built for them.
Hey, from your lips to their ears, man. Like I would 100% do it. I think we could find something really fun for that book.
I just, during the entirety of this with Savage Avengers, what you're doing with Space Ghost, I did not think at any point it would turn to Captain Planet. You know, that's
been my white whale for a long time.
How long?
At least as long as I've been a creator.
Watching it as a kid.
I watched it as a kid, and I it's funny. For me, the projects that most appeal to me, of course, I love writing characters that I grew up loving. Like I got a chance to write Spider-Man. I got to write Peter Parker last year, and that was like I could have died and gone to heaven. He's my favorite character in all of fiction. For me, the characters that I love the most are the ones where I see the potential in them. Like Cloak and Dagger, for example. I had wanted to be Avengers for 15 years because I was just like, they've got the potential to be Avengers. Their power sets, they've barely scratched the surface. And I remember asking Tom Brevoort when we were putting together our roster on Savage Avengers, I was like, there's only two characters that I'm going to like go to the mat fighting for. I want Cloak and Dagger, and was told no one else is asking for Cloak and Dagger. It's totally fine. And Captain Planet is kind of one of those characters for me, where like I grew up watching it, like I'd watch the cartoons, so I'm like familiar enough with the characters, but it wasn't something that I was like, it wasn't Power Rangers. for me.
Right.
Where like that, like butts and seats, got to watch that. But I think as I've gotten older, especially, I see the potential. I'm just like, oh, that's like a globe trotting, like, Avengers meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yeah, you know what? That's something that could put butts in seats. So yeah, potential. That's the thing that I love the most. I think that's kind of why Savage Avengers was such like a fun book for me, is that it was sort of my cast of misfit toys, where many of them hadn't gotten a lot of love, hadn't gotten a lot of page spotlight in recent times, and it doesn't take, you didn't really need to do much to polish those characters. I think those were characters that, like, in their bones, it was full of potential. So just being able to play with those. And I think, as I talk about it, I feel the same way about Space Ghost. It doesn't take much. There's no such thing, with rare exceptions, there's no such thing as a bad character. There's just characters who maybe they haven't had the right take in a while, or maybe haven't gotten their shot in the spotlight in a while. And all it takes is one creator who loves them, can find the love in them
Twice.
to make them shine like new.
Twice now, David, you've said, except in rare occasion, there's no such thing. Now, twice you've said that. The first time I was like, all right, whatever, he said it. So that's fine. I'll let it slide. But now twice now you've said it. So I need to know, what characters you think these are at this point.
I don't want to name names,
Don't
but they're.
mention
I'm not going to name anybody's names.
Not the person, the character. I don't need a human being that wrote it.
I think in my career thus far, in the big two, I've only backed away from two characters so far. And what I'll say is, those characters, there are certain characters that only work when there's a creator with a very singular vision for them. And so I didn't really like, and when those characters exist, they're cool, but they're hard to translate. It's hard to translate for somebody else. Like, that becomes that character's, that creator's baby. So that's, I think, as far as I can go with that. But that said, I've been proven wrong many a time. And actually, what I will say, there was a character who, when I had on Savage Avengers, that my initial gut reaction was like, "What? Are you kidding me? Are you pranking me here?" It was Weapon Age. That was a character who kind of came onto the team by necessity. When I took Savage Avengers, the first thing I said was, I want to have a permanent roster on that team, because Jerry Duggan's run had sort of a loose roster in its first arc, but then after that first arc, it was Conan kind of teaming up with various characters of the Marvel Universe before kind of bringing together another loose roster for the final arc. And so I said, I want a permanent team, which wound up being good foresight, because when we were told that we had to write Conan out of the book, if I didn't have a permanent roster, the whole book would have disintegrated. And I said, to honor Jerry's original roster, I said, I need to check at least 3 boxes from his original roster. I need a Punisher, or I need a street level vigilante of some kind. I need a symbiote, and I need somebody with claws. I was like, if I can't get at least 3 of those characters, this concept doesn't really make any sense to me. And I was told, Elektra, no problem. I was like, great. She was a founding Savage Avenger. And now she's Daredevil. It's a perfect upgrade for her. I was told that we could use Flash Thompson, that he wasn't being used in any of the symbiote offices. And at first I had asked for Akihiro, the son of Wolverine. And I at first was told, I don't think that'll be a problem. Let's just check in with the X office. And that's when I found out that Steve Orlando was using Akihiro in routers. And a character kind of at that level, they can't really support 2 books. Like, you got to pick one or the other. And Steve had already called I couldn't use Logan because Logan had been in a time travel, or was in the process of it being in a time travel book in Lives and Deaths of Wolverine. Laura Kinney was going to be headlining over in Jerry's X-Men run. And also I found there would have been a lot of overlap with her and Elektra. And so I said to Tom, I was like, I need a claw guy. Like, who do we have? Because I said, you know, do you want me to use like, Jimmy Hudson? He was like, that character requires like a whole Wikipedia summary to like explain who he is. Let's not do that. It was Tom who said, well, what about Weapon H? And at first, my first thought was like, are you pranking me, sir? I didn't know him well enough. You know, the guy who's half Hulk, half Wolverine, you know, I'm pretty sure that character got created like as an office joke that like kind of got away from them. And then I thought, wait, like, you know, what's the potential behind this character? And I had been thinking, there was never a Hulk in Jerry's Savage Avengers run. And if you're thinking about Savage characters in the Marvel universe, like the Hulk feels like an oversight. And I had been reading Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk, and he had all the Gamma characters in that. And so I said to Tom, I was like, look, like if you're telling me this guy's just raw material and then nobody's doing anything with him, maybe I can twist the toys a little bit. What if we turned him into Dial H for Hulk, where we can have him switch between all these different Gamma characters, and so that way he's a little bit more of like a Swiss Army knife. He's a little bit more of a utility player. And the fact that Tom went for that, I was like, great, I've got an in now. I've got something that like interests me about the character. So even characters, you know, and I can tell you there were a lot of people who, when we announced Savage Avengers, they were like, Weapon H, really, that guy? And I can tell you, as I wrote that series, anytime I was in a jam, the answer always wound up coming down to this is either a problem for Black Knight to solve or Weapon H to solve, invariably. And so, yeah, he wound up being like a really fun character. And honestly, I think Carlos Magno, out of all the characters that he drew in that book, I feel like it's either got to be Weapon H or it was Cloak. Like those two characters, Carlos really knocked out of the park. So it worked out in a really cool way.
I mean, that definitely is just a kind of a fun character too, though. But I love how it's a joke in the Marvel office that just got out of hand. Because that's look when I seen that character. Oh, go ahead, Steven.
The blank slate, essentially, outside of the most basic of motivations, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's always kind of nice. Like, I think it's nice to draw from continuity. You know, there's a little bit of like a journalistic kind of side to it where you can kind of do the research and figure out what threads speak to you. But I do think sometimes, especially today, continuity can be a little double-edged. You know, I think that sometimes there's an expectation from certain corners of the fandom where they'll say, well, listen, I really love this person's run of XYZ character. And if you do anything that contradicts this run, this book is a failure in my eyes. And that maybe feels a little restrictive as a creator. And you kind of have to kind of take it on a case-by-case basis where you're just like, is this something that is like core to the character? You know, something like, you know, Wolverine, you know, when they gave Wolverine bone claws, for example, like that's a part of the character that like you have to in the back of your head know, like his bones were coated, including the claws with adamantium. There are other things though where it's just like it's characterization, you know, where you know, I can say, like, for example, I remember I wrote the Guardians of the Galaxy in Avengers Unlimited, and I like Peter Quill's sense of humor, so I kind of leaned into that and the pop culture of it all. And, I remember somebody being very upset that I hadn't leaned into sort of the cosmic overarching seriousness that the character had taken in a previous run. And that kind of thing, you know, it stings because of course you want to make sure that like people like your work, but at the same time, like in my opinion at least, you know, you're being hired for your point of view, you're being hired for your voice. And The idea of trying to stay in lockstep to match somebody else's voice or somebody else's point of view, you're never going to do as good of a job being somebody else as you will being yourself. And so sometimes you kind of have to like take that hit. But so I do think like having a character that has a clean slate like Weapon H, or honestly even Space Ghost to an extent, it's very freeing because you're able to sort of really trust your instincts and follow your gut without the fear of somebody trying to keep score based on like somebody else's work.
No,
Especially if it's obscure.
no, David. If by the last issue of this Space Ghost run, he's not interviewing some real obscure famous person, all right, I'm gonna be a no.
Maybe that'll be year 2.
Bring back that coast to coast side of it.
Well, the only thing
I'll call this a prequel.
with me is if Moltar's not in it. So
Moltar's in issue 6.
I've seen him.
He's in the last issue I turned in. So yes, you'll see Moltar, no problem.
I figured you had to have had them, man. I'm curious, then, what are you doing when dealing with that fandom like that? I want to know. Well, I want to know specifically when you're dealing with something like the Axe Fantastic Four book you did, which was the Avengers, X-Men, Eternals, which is one of those big Marvel things. Like, and it's probably in the entire. Like, I mean, they're doing Blood Hunt right now, but I think that particular event was probably a little bit bigger than Blood Hunt as far as the entirety of everything, because it shifted, a little harder. Even though I'm enjoying the crap out of Blood Hunt. I want to point out, to bring up Erica Schultz again. I'm loving what she's doing in Blood Hunters too. I feel like that's one right there, David, where you had a higher probability of fans being upset.
And I was really happy with how all of that turned out, honestly. I think Fantastic Four, it's so funny. Fantastic Four kind of continued a trend that I hit a lot last year, where my fiance would ask me, is there any character that you would not want to write because you like don't know what you would do? And I invariably would say that character out loud, and then the next month I'd have an editor asking me if I had a pitch for that character. And Fantastic Four was definitely up there where I was just like, oh man, like I wouldn't know what to do with those characters, because when those characters have hit their highs, they're very, very high. You know, Stan and Jack, Mark Waid and Mike Wieringo, what Ryan North is doing right now, the John Byrne era. I grew up reading a lot of that. So of course, they asked me to write Fantastic Four, and they're saying you've got 2 issues, and we're trying to do this thing with Axe Judgment Day, and they gave me kind of I think it was a 1 or 2 page write up, kind of just giving the very broad strokes of this event. I think Kieran Gillen, honestly, he's a mensch. I mean, I think the fact that he was so gracious and trying to put together a big scale event, but also basically saying, hey, look, this is almost like a philosophical bent. And so whatever characters you're tackling, you have a lot of freedom to approach it in a very different way. And you see the way that like Zeb Wells did his issues of Spider-Man in that, or the way that Mark Russell tackled it in Avengers, is very different than the way that I tackled it in Fantastic Four. The way that we tackled Fantastic Four kind of came a little out of necessity, in that, when you have giant space gods who are looking to like attack the Earth, my first thought is Reed Richards. You think of Galactus. But this event is not called Facts. There's no Fantastic Four are not front and center in this kind of event. It's X-Men, Avengers, Eternals. So my immediate question is, okay, then where's Reed during all this? Reed clearly has his own issues going on if he's not headlining an event like this. So let's turn this into a literal bottle episode. And then by virtue of that, knowing that I have 40 pages to tell this story across 2 issues, how do we maximize that real estate? And so, for example, we throw Reed in his think tank. And so we don't have to see him really for the rest until the end of the series. He's got, he shows up, I think, over the span of 3 pages. Great. We can have him narrate the whole thing so his presence is still there. But that way we really only have to focus on 3 characters. And then we can kind of triage those characters in order. Tom Brevoort and I both were in immediate agreement that we wanted to do something Sue Storm focused. Because I felt that made sense, given the sort of the dialogue on faith and judgment in Judgment Day. Who's a character that better represents something that cannot be seen but is intrinsically felt, like the Invisible Woman? So I wound up writing it for my fiance. I wrote it all about her. I credit her for my entire career. I think it was our 4th or 5th date that we were having dinner, and I said, I have an idea for a screenplay. I've never written a screenplay before, but it'd be kind of fun to try it. And she let me pitch her the entire dinner, and she was into it. And by the time that dinner ended, I realized, like, not only is this probably not going to be a casual thing, but also I guess I got to write this thing, because otherwise she's going to be disappointed. So I wrote that about her as sort of my personal Sue Storm. If I'm the Reed Richards who's locked away in his office trying to think all this stuff through, she's the one holding everything down in the real world. And it is kind of like my rock and my center of gravity. So yeah, I think it also helps, having somebody as talented as Juan Cabal drawing that book. That guy, I think, immediately understood what we were going for. The fact that, like, I tried to riff on Die Hard. He immediately was throwing in all sorts of fun details that kind of sold that even more. Like Sue Storm losing her shoes, fighting the Herbies. That was all Juan. But yeah, I think that I think more than anything I've gotten to write, maybe up until Space Ghost, that was really kind of me speaking from the heart. And I think that's what the Fantastic Four is, at their best, is you've got like the big cosmic sci-fi space opera of it all, but it's ultimately about like a family that, like, they bicker, they fight, but they like deeply love each other. They are there for each other in the clinch, no matter what. And I think it was very daunting, kind of coming right after Dan Slott, who I've known him for years, and I respect the hell out of him as a creator. I actually did a writing class with him back in the day, so I feel like a lot that I've learned I know from Dan. So being able to sort of being the middle act between him and then Ryan North taking the baton and just doing some of the most brilliant work of his career. It was a real honor to be able to contribute in a small way to that tapestry, especially with Marvel's first family. I'm very proud of how it turned out, and it's my fiance's favorite thing I've ever written, so I'll never forget it.
No, yeah, that's awesome, David. And then you go and you're like, I'm gonna do some scary story, and it's like the devil that wears my face. We didn't really touch on. We touched on that a little bit, man. We didn't really get into it though, because look, I ain't gonna lie. Maybe there's this part of me that really wants to know more about this story, because the graphic ain't out yet, and I ain't had a chance to read it. And Mad Cave's doing their talent hunt right now, and it's one of the 4 worlds that you can pick and choose from. And like, I'm looking at these 4 worlds, and I'm like, I read a lot of comics, but I don't read any. Like, why couldn't they put Dick Tracy on this? I could have done that one.
Yeah, Devil was such a fun book. I mean, the quick elevator pitch for all the listeners out there is it's what if the Exorcist met Face Off? It's about a priest who is dealing with a pretty profound crisis of faith, and then as he's performing an exorcism, the ritual backfires, and so he's left stranded in the victim's body, while the demon has taken over the priest's body and returns to the Vatican to wreak havoc. It was, I'd wanted to do horror for a long time. I up to that point, all I had done was I'd done some anthology work. I had done I think that no, I don't think my Hulk. I wrote this before my Hulk one shot. So all I had done is some anthology work in the genre, and it felt like kind of the missing food group for me career wise. And I love the movie Face Off. It's one of my favorites. I love the body swap element of it all. I love watching John Travolta and Nicolas Cage try to outdo each other. They're just like chewing on the scenery. Yeah, I like the structure of these body swap stories where you kind of build these characters up very archetypically, and you build up sort of their environments, and then you throw them out of their usual context, and you watch how they have to navigate these new worlds, and invariably one of them takes to it better than the other one, and the other one kind of wants to return things back to the status quo. And yeah, so it provides a lot of fun drama and a lot of fun twists and turns that we were able to kind of add to the mix, in addition to some fun like twists on supernatural. So yeah, and I think working with Alex Cormack on that book, he was super game for anything brutal that I threw in there, and if anything, he kind of elevated the violence even more than what I had written. I think for a while we had like a count of, like, we called it a head count because it was how many people had been decapitated in the book. And Alex was sending me like gifs of Austin Powers, like saying, that's not how you're the head of a major corporation. He has his background in animation, and I think it really shows in his work that he's not just thinking about comics from a panel to panel layout standpoint, but he's also thinking about the expressions and the body language and the acting of it all. And I think it really elevates everything that I'm doing. Working with somebody who's so focused on portraying these characters as like living, breathing, three-dimensional actors. Yeah, it really like it makes the work way stronger for it. So I'll always have great things to say about working with Alex.
Man, Steven, you got anything deep to get into? Because like, is it terrible? I want to continue this conversation for so long, and sometimes that happens over here at the Quest, where I'm like, I'm just gonna start asking about random things now, because I know it'll be an interesting conversation. Like, really, like, I want to know, like, what was the first comic you picked up, David?
It's Amazing Spider-Man 346.
Just like
Spider-Man and Venom right before they wind up on the island. I think my parents got me that when I was 4 years old. It made me a lifer. So, yeah.
I can't believe you were good. That's a good issue to start on, though. That old school, like, Spider-Man Venom, that's like, look, I know that you were, like you say, when you were asking for a symbiont, and you got Thompson, right? But look, like, I tried to, like, I don't remember what I'd picked up. It was something. It was right when they were doing the whole symbiont god and all that, and like I started looking through it, and my brain hurt a little. I'll be real honest. I feel like I need a symbiont Wikipedia to read through for an hour before I can begin to read this graphic novel.
Well, I'll say, it's not a con story, but I will say it's a fun career story. Is that for years, I had Amazing Spider-Man 346. I read the thing. It was a well-loved comic, and I never knew what happened in that book. And so I promised myself that I wouldn't buy that issue to find out unless I had become a comic creator of my own. So yeah, when Spencer and Locke came out and I did a signing at Graham Cracker Comics, they had a copy of Amazing 347. So I bought that for myself, and I found out how the story ended. So yes, that was a pretty cool moment in my career.
For that long, you didn't know how that story ended?
I refused. I said I started this way, but I got to take a swing at this. Otherwise, I'll always wonder what if. So, yeah, talk about a leap of faith rewarded.
Well, I hate to break in, but
Well-
it's dinner time for me.
Oh
so
no,
I'm
no,
on my
okay,
way.
yeah. Well,
Sure.
let's wrap it up on that note. But I got what is there a what if you want to write, David? Real quick.
I do. Yeah, I've got a Captain America what if in me.
All right.
So
All
yeah,
right.
maybe
All right.
one
Well,
day.
it has been a phenomenal quest, gentlemen. I hope you all are able to link up over there at San Diego Comic-Con coming up real soon. But I want to let y'all know out there that if you've enjoyed this quest with David, right? What I want you to do is I want you to, I guess, just give him health insurance, right? Right. And a bunch of those OG Marvel Masterpiece trading cards, right? And just send him all the pizza, right? Just all the pizza. Oh, and if you see him out at a con and he looks hungry, give the man a Reese's, right? All right. That's what I want you to do if you've enjoyed.
Some you pick up the rights to Captain Planet.
Yes.
Oh
please,
yeah, and yeah,
please.
somebody get him the rights because I honestly do that for me if you've enjoyed this quest because I want to see what David does with Captain Planet based on what he's doing with Space Ghost because that's a yeah, that'll be intriguing. Now, if for some reason you haven't enjoyed this quest with David, one, I don't know how you made it to the end because we set these up as premieres, and if you watch this whole thing live just to see this. I mean, I guess you did. So here it is, right? So if you didn't enjoy this quest, what I want you to do is I want you to send some fast moving zombies. You know, them speedsters like, you know, from the
Don't do that.
Dawn
Don't
of
do
the
that.
Dead, right?
Don't put
Make
that on
sure,
me.
make sure they've been well soaked in pesto first, right? You know, and just for the fun of it, have them playing "Shaped by You" by Ed Sheridan. Just the attached speakers. A bunch of running zombies playing that soaked in pesto. Again, that's
Sounds
only
like my
if for
worst
some
nightmare.
reason you didn't enjoy this quest. I hope that you have for all y'all out there. For everyone who's want to learn more about David, click all the links in the description. There's bunches, or maybe just one. Yeah, maybe just one to David's website, actually. I don't know. It depends on how copy and pasty I was feeling on that particular moment. Besides that, look, I want you all to do three things. One, give it that thumbs up or the equivalent, you know, whatever, right? Two, always get your comic on. There's plenty you can go pick up over at David's site. Three, have a good night, y'all.
Thanks, guys.
This has been the questionnaire.
Where's the link?
Thanks for checking out the questionnaire.
In the link below, yes?
I will drop it like it's hot.
That's another party.
It's cool, man. I love it.
The questionnaire. That is all.